There's a huge problem in this country with gender equality. I mean, as you've seen recently in the global gender gap, we've fallen to 26th place in the world, which is really embarrassing. We used to be 9th place 10 years ago. But the real problem, yes, men have a much higher suicide rate, and that's because we tell children when they're 1 year old that boys and girls are different. And this causes boys to grow up without any emotional intelligence. People think, oh yeah, we need gender equality because this will get girls into STEM subjects, which is true. But even more important than that, we need gender equality so that boys won't be violent. There's a wonderful charity based in Edinburgh called Zero Tolerance, which is teaching gender equality to childminders so that they can teach children that they're equal, they have equal opportunities, and they do it specifically to reduce violence from men to women when they're adults. We need to start much earlier than men.
OK, Milo, you want to come in?
Unbelievable, astonishing sexism. We have to teach young boys not to be boys so they won't be violent.
Why is being violent being...
Get out! Get out! I'm sorry. Like, we teach boys and girls that they're the same, and that's a problem. They are different. When we do experiments on young babies and even on related animals, we know that certain children go for certain toys. Boys and girls are different. To give you some context for all of this, you have to understand a little bit about the history of feminism. There have been two main strands.
And here is our local expert.
Well, yes. Of course, because of course men aren't allowed to speak about anything that isn't to do with men, except no one's really interested in.
Let him talk. Already said indicate that you know nothing about it.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the problems that men are experiencing in society. And since you're not a man, perhaps you could like to give it a rest for a second. So there is a wider context in which men are suffering slightly. Even 10 years ago it would have been ridiculous to say it. But very recently, we've seen a lot of structural advantages to being a woman crop up in education, in the workplace. Under 30, women earn more than men for the same work in the UK and the US now, which is an extraordinary statistic and something that people have to be very carefully convinced of because it sounds absurd. But there is a sense in which men, particularly young men, probably men our age, haven't necessarily experienced it, but younger men, 20-year-olds, there's an enormous problem. I read about this last year. I call it the sexodus, of men checking out society, checking out of relationships, giving up on women, giving up on careers. They don't bother to go to university anymore. Now more women go to university, women get higher grades at university, more women graduate from university. Yep. All of the traditional imbalances between men and women have flipped, and very recently.
No, that's
and when
incorrect,
young men,
when you go
may I be allowed to
in the
finish?
business,
Sorry, I'm talking
correct.
about men, darling.
And you called her darling? How incredibly rude. And now you think it's funny. Well, this is exactly the problem. This is institutionalised sexism, and you're just sitting here doing it flagrantly and without even apologising.
Well, we just heard that it was an essential characteristic of men that they were violent a minute ago. So
no,
I guess
we did not.
That's exactly what you said.
Nobody said that. That's just a lie.
My point simply
wait, I'm getting out of here. I tell you.
Look, I'm tempted to come with you, Nick.
If anyone in the audience wants...
Well, joining me now to discuss this and the wider implications are the columnist and broadcaster Milo Yiannopoulos and the journalist Edo Lodge. They're in our central London studios for us this evening. Very good evening to you both. Rennie, how do you feel about being called different because you're hardwired differently? I'm sure it's not something you've failed to hear before. It just seems to keep cropping up. Is it necessary?
It's ridiculous. It's 50s thinking, you know. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, this biological determinism. Frankly, you know, interests and talent and, you know, passions for particular topics, subjects, sports, arts, whatever, like, they're not relegated to either gender, but unfortunately, because of some stereotypical thinking, often one gender is encouraged to pursue, you know, a sport or an art more so than the other. And actually, when you look at my colleague at the Telegraph, Radhika Saghani, she wrote a piece just this morning speaking to like young girls who play chess, and actually what she found out is that they're dropping out at the age of 12, probably because, you know, they're not encouraged, or, you know, there's an environment around that's telling them that it's not for them, it's not cool, etc., etc. So, you know, this hardwired brain stuff, like it's retro-sexism.
So, Milo Yiannopoulos, does it matter if men and women are wired differently, have different skills?
No, it doesn't matter in the sense that they are equal but different, but it simply isn't true to say that there is no difference whatsoever between the aptitudes of men and women. And it is, without question, true that there are some biological differences between men and women, and we know that from our anatomy. But we also know it from experiments that we do on young children before they've had the opportunity to be socialised, the sorts of toys that they go for. And that holds true, actually, for other bits of the animal kingdom as well. Some of the reason why girls drop out of STEM subjects at college and chess clubs is because they keep losing. And one of the reasons they keep losing is that it does seem to be the case that chess as a game plays to some of the male intellectual virtues. And when Simon Baron-Cohen talks about these, the way he describes it is men are good at systematising and women are good at empathising. And there is some reason to suppose that that may have some basis in biology. It's very trendy these days to say that everything is socially determined, but that's not what the science says. And it's not either what common sense says, because if it were true, these days there would be a lot more representation of women in the sciences, in astrophysics, in philosophy, in mathematics, and in chess, but there isn't.
So, Rennie, does that make sense? And does it really matter? I mean, should we just accept that we are slightly different, have different skills, pursue them, or should we all be striving to be as good as each other at everything?
It seems really reductive, to be honest with you. I mean, if you look around at your, male and female friends and families, you'll see a vast, a huge, wide variety and diversity in interests and talents and passions, right? And also, I think that it's ridiculous to assume that the reason why one gender is overrepresented in a field is because the other gender is not quite up to it. I mean, often, if a field is homogenous, right, which, as we can see, chess is homogenous, that also brings with it a culture that makes things unwelcoming for people who do not quite fit the bill. It's almost victim blaming in a way to suggest that the reason why there's an overrepresentation of a particular kind of person is because the other kind of person just isn't quite up to it. It's ridiculous. If that was the case, we don't live in a meritocracy. So
it's nice to have these sort of vague, waffly, sort of everyone has varied interests. What the science suggests is that, for example, when it comes to IQ is distributed differently between the sexes. Now, IQ gets a really bad rap because it's not a great indicator of some things. It's said to be sexist, it's said to be biased towards white people, whatever. The point is that it tests, in this case, it tests all of the skills that make you good at chess really well. It's about puzzles, it's about games, exactly the skills that make you good at chess, make you good at IQ. Now, the way that IQ is distributed differently in the sexes is that women tend to cluster around the mean. Women are more likely to have an IQ that is somewhere near the average, whereas men go right to the top or right to the bottom more often, which is why you get great genius male artists and philosophers, but it's also why men fill all the prisons, because men seem to occupy more of the ends of the IQ scale. And now IQ is pretty much the best measure we have to predict whether somebody will be good at chess.
And what it proves, and what it also proves, that men and women can talk forever. It's been a pleasure talking to you both. We're going to leave it there. Thank goodness we're all different.
Yes, indeed. Thanks.
Big question for you. Should companies be forced to publish the wages earned by their male and female staff? David Cameron believes it will help abolish unequal pay in the workforce. But some argue there's no problem to solve. Let's get more on this with writer and broadcaster Milo Yiannopoulos and journalist and author Nikki Hodgson. Ladies first. Nikki, what do you think?
I think it's a great idea. It's brilliant that David Cameron has embraced this initiative, which I actually think came from Labour originally. It doesn't need to be a finger-pointing exercise. I think that's the main point to make. This is just a really good chance to look at how boosting women's earning power can boost the economy.
You disagree, Milo?
Well, actually, I think it's a great idea, but not for the same reasons. The problem is that what most people don't realise, the gender pay gap is a sort of myth. No economist takes it seriously. The ONS figures come from broad church sort of averages across the workforce, and when you take into account the different choices women make, whether or not you include children in that, actually the pay gap narrows to zero. So I'm in favour of this only because it's going to really embarrass these campaigners who constantly tell women that they're victims and that they're suffering under this sort of patriarchal society. Actually, women and men get paid pretty much the same, to the point of a couple of percent. So I am in favour of it, but only because it's going to explode one of the most persistent feminist myths of our time, the gender pay gap.
Nikki, it amounts to zero, this pay gap.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think the issue is that women tend to take, lower paid work, more part-time work. In these kinds of companies, that's not the case, but what it is going to show is how women are not very good at pushing themselves forward sometimes in the corporate environment, and they really struggle to ask for what they're worth, and that is a problem for all of us, because ultimately that, affects the economy, it affects the earning potential of these companies.
Milo, the latest figures, percentages suggest that the gender pay gap currently stands at 19.1%, which means a woman on average earns 80p for every pound a man earns.
Well, the Office for National Statistics figures are based on 1% of an average right the way across the industry, so they don't take into account the different kinds of jobs people are doing, so really they're effectively meaningless. But there's a very simple question that demonstrates why the whole debate is nonsense and why the pay gap is a ridiculous sort of fabrication. And it's this: if women are doing the same work for less money, why aren't companies full of women? Why aren't employers going out actively seeking women? Well, they don't, and they don't for some of the same reasons that women take different sorts of roles and different part-time roles. Women don't work as long hours as men do, even if they don't have children. They take longer holidays. They don't make as much money for their firms. They don't work the same overtime. So we can't really expect them to be compensated the same as men when they don't work as hard. Now, that's not, I don't mean that to sound, unkind about women. Women simply have different priorities in life. Most women want a more balanced life. They want time with their family. They want to do hobbies. They want more time away on holiday. They don't want to put in the work that those sort of obsessive, aggressive, sort of goal-oriented male professions sometimes demand. The law, for example. Women just aren't really interested in devoting their whole life to work in that way. And the very broad brush figures from the ONS simply reflect that. What they don't show is that a woman going to the workplace is going to be paid less than a man for the same. In fact, under the age of 35 in the UK and the US, women are paid more in the same sorts of roles, and they're 2 to 1 more likely to get jobs in science and maths because employers are so desperate to hire women.
Nikki's not generalising at all there about how hard women work.
No, exactly. I think there's hundreds of women that won't be watching this programme because they're too busy working in order to argue with that point. I don't think that's true at all. What we really have is a social problem, a problem where we expect women to take the burden of family care, to care for elder relatives, and so as a result they often end up working less hard, as Milo puts it, because what they're doing is they're working second shifts, third shifts, caring for other people. What we need is a culture change to allow women to be able to work just as hard as men if they so choose, and that isn't happening yet. But what would be good about publishing these results is that it would pave the way for a conversation about how society is structured so that women aren't able to function as highly as men are in some professions.
Oh, you were too gentle with him. Milo, are you suggesting for 1 second that I do not work as hard as my male colleagues? I take more time off than my male colleagues. Well, I think, and I am not in any way as committed as my male colleagues.
I think, and I mean this in the nicest and most complimentary way possible, you're probably atypical in most respects as a sort of workaholic of either gender. You're probably not typical of women. You're probably not typical of anyone in the kind of work that you do. What I'm talking about is not, bashing women for not putting in the hours. What I'm saying is, in general, women look for different things from life. So they look to fulfill themselves to flourish in slightly different ways. And of course, if you look at the end statistics about pay, they're going to reflect that. That's not necessarily a problem. Now, when people lose the economic argument, they always switch to the social argument, as your other guest just did. And unfortunately, the problem is that a lot of this is underpinned by this sort of constant victimhood complex that women are encouraged to buy into. They're given this victimhood script about, whether it's rape culture on campus or pay under the male average. And most of it's based on ridiculous sort of social science studies that don't stand up to the most basic scrutiny. Most of it simply isn't true. And I think the majority of women don't want to be patronised, don't want to be given special privileges, don't want to be given special dispensation. They want to go out to the workplace, be paid what they're worth. And of course, if they want to raise a family, they're not going to get to be CEO, or not going to get to to be a partner in a law firm. You can't have it all. You can't do all of these things. And what really sort of frustrates me, and I think frustrates a lot of ordinary women who find these sorts of debates a bit dull and a bit mystifying, is that there's some sort of somehow implication always behind the scenes that being that motherhood is a bad thing, and that it's a bad thing for a woman to aspire to raise a family and to be a mother. Actually, it's sort of one of the most extraordinary things that anybody can accomplish and anybody can do. But there's this sort of assumption that if you do that, then we've got to make sort of special dispensation when you go back to work and pay you more and give you all these benefits and whatever, rather than celebrating the unique things that women can do in society that men can't.
He started off that answer, Nikki, by trying to compliment me and take the wind out of my sails. You have a go.
Absolutely. I've got no time for that argument whatsoever. You know, women want to do many varied and amazing things with their lives. Motherhood might be part of that. But, you know, again, if that's such a wonderful thing to do, why are men not bending over backwards to take time off to raise their children? They're not, because the culture is not set up to encourage men to share the load of care. You know, women, even when they're married and working, do more domestic chores than men do. We've seen these surveys time and time again, and I think it's really insulting to say that women, you know, might not be as inclined to work as hard or want different things from life. There are plenty of women who are hugely ambitious. Just look at the number of graduates that we have now. Women are outstripping men. They're getting better degrees. What we haven't seen yet is culture change to accommodate and to reflect that. And I think the other thing is that it tends to be older women often that are also in part-time work positions, but we shouldn't just leave them to flounder. They're often picking up care bills for elderly parents as well as looking after children and the rest of their families. So, you know, I just think Milo's argument is ridiculous that women, you know, shouldn't be paid as much because they want other things from life.
OK, Milo, we've been given more time, so you're going to have to work even harder. It's more than 40 years since the Equal Pay Act, and yet still it is a fact that women do not earn as much as men.
No, I'm sorry, it's not a fact. You can only say that if you take broad brush averages across all industries and all genders, and you can say the amount of money going to women is a bit less.
Well,
it's not. I mean, for one thing, it's illegal to pay a woman less than a man for the same work.
Interrupt him, Nikki. Go on.
No, they say,
it's illegal to pay a woman.
If that's the case, then when these results are published, they won't reveal anything. They won't reveal any difference, but they're going to. That's the point. The whole reason David Cameron is encouraging it.
I want them to be published because what they're going to show is that at all stages, all else being equal, the genders are paid the same. Or even what they might show, you're saying the culture hasn't changed. I think your argument's 20 years out of date. The culture has changed, which is precisely why there are more women going to university, more women graduate from university, they're getting higher grades, they're 2-to-1 favoured when they go for job applications, particularly in science and technology, and they're paid more, depending on whose figures you believe, up to the age of 30, 35 or 39, it's probably about 35, women are paid more than men. So whatever gender pay gap you're talking about has already been fixed.
But it hasn't.
So the good news for you is that you know, there isn't a problem anymore, although there used to be, and that if we do release these figures, which I'm very excited about, they're going to prove me right. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
But that's not true. I mean, the point is the gap is there still, and older women in particular suffer more from it from younger women. We shouldn't just leave older women, you know, to flounder, should we? Just because they were part of a generation where it was even more difficult for them to get on. I'm making a specific explanation about where these figures come from, and you haven't really addressed the point that I'm making. What I'm saying is that you can only create this gender gap when you take a broad brush across all genders, all sectors, all work. That doesn't reflect the different choices people make, and employers aren't, you know, shouldn't be forced to pay a full-time salary to somebody who works part-time. You haven't come up with a solution to that, and you haven't addressed the problem with the figures, which is that no serious economist treats the gender pay gap as a problem to be solved. No economist thinks this is a problem because they realise what I'm explaining.
Is that male economists or female economists, just to be clear?
Well, I mean, where I get most of my figures on this from is from a feminist female academic, Christina Hoff Sommers at the American Enterprise Institute in the US, who looks at the figures from the UK and the US, and she does a broad survey of all economists, I'm sure of all genders, but my source for this sort of stuff is generally Christina Hoff Sommers. So she is a female feminist academic who is mystified that this is this sort of feminist myth that won't die.
Good for her. Nikki, final thought to you.
I just think that we need to see the figures published, because then we can start analysing the data. You know, publishing the numbers without any analysis of it is obviously going to be a waste of time and no use. But I think David Cameron should be applauded, actually, for this move.
I can agree on that much.
OK. You've both worked equally hard. Both of you submit your invoices. You both get paid the same. Thanks very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News this afternoon. Thank you.
Look, any political movement that, any political personality that attracts from frat boys to veterans to Ann Coulter to, you know, sassy gay British columnists, there's something interesting. There's something interesting going on there.
Yes, that's true.
And it's something that the majority of conservative media would rather sneer and scoff about, have front covers of their magazines saying, oh no, we can't possibly endorse this, you know, horrible populist, you know, sleazy character. Well, I'm sorry, but this person has captured the energy and imagination of conservatives under 50, and conservative media has forgotten how to talk to those people. It doesn't even like them on the rare occasion it notices they exist. You know, I try to write for people who are under 50, unlike most conservative journalists, and they
thank you.
And they love him. They love him.
Yeah,
you know,
who else?
It began as a standard Hollywood production.
Now there's sightings all over the city.
a remake of the beloved 1984 movie Ghostbusters.
Get out of my friend, Ghost!
This time with an all-female cast.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, did you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next time.
One of the stars, Leslie Jones. But within a few days of the movie's release, Leslie Jones was subjected to incredibly vicious attacks on Twitter. Many of the attacks, known as trolling, came from anonymous users, but not all of them.
Are you a troll?
Of course.
What is trolling? How do you look at it?
I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll. You know, I'm doing God's work.
Milo Yiannopoulos, also known as Nero online, joined in the tormenting of Jones, calling her a man on Twitter to his 350,000-plus followers.
In the Twitter storm
sure,
that happened,
I was
you called her a dude. If Leslie Jones were right here, would you say, you look like a dude?
Yeah, probably.
You would say that,
Yeah,
sir?
probably. I probably would.
Then you're an idiot, really.
Milo, as everyone calls him, is one of the most famous or infamous trolls on the internet. He's an editor at Breitbart, the ultra-conservative news website. He accused Jones of playing the victim and later called her barely literate.
I don't say anything I don't believe, but of course I do say things in a way that is going to elicit a response from people.
Jones detailed the abusive words and images she was receiving and the racist and misogynistic slurs against her that even compared her to an ape.
Leslie Jones is
God.
the equal
This
of
idea,
you or me as a human being with feelings.
Of course she is. But this idea that celebrities are these fragile wallflowers, give me a break. You and I both know people in Hollywood.
Because she acted in a movie,
Hollywood
you rallied
blockbusters
people.
are sitting at home crying into their iPhones.
Why didn't you stand up, as people called her, ape, gorilla, and worse, and say, guys, this is good to do, but not racism.
Why should I have to police other people's speech?
Stand up for rights?
I'm responsible.
Why not stand up for the rights?
I'm responsible for what I say. I'm perfectly happy to tell you I think that stuff is disgusting.
So you have
I'm
no
perfectly happy to
obligation for your 350,000 followers.
Does Justin Bieber have an obligation to his
descending on this woman?
I'm sorry for being popular, but I am not responsible for what 350,000 people on the internet say. I am responsible for what I say.
All right.
Do you go after Selena Gomez when her fans send death threats to Justin Bieber? No. Do you go after Beyonce when her fans go after Taylor Swift? No.
The 48-year-old actress is a regular on Saturday Night Live.
Nobody writes love letters anymore.
They don't write love letters?
Well, maybe you do, you sexy creamsicle. Just want to chop all the orange off and get to the crib.
Ghostbusters is her first starring role in a major film.
The power of pain compels you!
Leslie Jones is just one target of the self-proclaimed troll. Milo makes a career sparking outrage, spraying vitriol at many, and helping to legitimize a movement of negativity growing on the internet. One of his hot topics?
When they wanted to have me removed from Pershing Square, a public space in the center of Los Angeles.
Is the female physique.
You're going to go after somebody's body?
Yeah.
To denigrate their ideas? What grade are you in? Seriously?
No.
Are you a 13-year-old boy?
No. Absolutely I will, and I'll tell you why.
Because somebody doesn't have a weight that you think is proper?
So...
That's revolting.
No, it's not revolting.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. I'll tell you what's revolting. What's revolting is the body positivity movement. What's revolting is this idea now that you can tell women that they'll be healthy at any size. Why? Because it tells women that you can be fat and you can be unattractive and you'll be happy anyway. That's a lie.
Feminists are another target.
I would rather a healthier, equitable arrangement that existed between the sexes, rather than the sort of vindictive feminism that seems to exist now. And by the way, most people agree with me. Fewer than 1 in 5 women in America describe themselves as a feminist because they see what I see.
There seem to be no limits, no holds barred for the dropout from Cambridge University in England, sometime poet, tech journalist, Donald Trump supporter, gay Catholic, and entrepreneur.
These pathological, sociopathic, feminist liars in popular culture, it is insisted upon us that we all pay obeisance to the cult of Lena Dunham and Amy Schumer. They're put on the cover of the magazines, and we're all expected to pretend that we like them. Well, we don't.
He's talking about a best-selling author and A-list movie star who also happens to have her own hit TV series, Inside Amy Schumer.
Amy,
Yeah, you have the right house, 623 Supermodel Lane. Get in here, you lifesaver.
I like Amy Schumer. She's
Nobody
funny.
likes
She
them.
makes me laugh.
Oh, please.
A lot.
Oh, God. Well, you must have very low standards for comedy, I'm telling you. Oh, they're not very much makes me laugh with Amy Schumer. These are terrible, talentless people that we are instructed that we must like unless... Then the sort of subtext is, you know, if you don't like them, you're some kind of bigot somehow.
Milo declares himself a provocateur.
I don't entirely believe in lesbians.
A prankster. And that no one should be upset by his so-called antics.
If I'm occasionally mean, it's normally because they deserve it.
With my name-calling and with my provocation and with my bad manners, you know, I think actually America's had enough of nice manners. If my rudeness creates conversation, my rudeness provokes people into, first of all, saying, oh, what a monster, blah, 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 and then 20% of people start talking about what I was actually saying, I will consider my career to have been a terrific success.
Perhaps the targeting of Leslie Jones just contributes to his idea of worldwide success.
In the Twitter storm that happened, you called her a dude.
I said it's a good job there's a hot black dude in the movie. She looks like a man. I am entitled to say that I think a celebrity looks weird.
You think that's fair comment and a decent thing,
That's like
and a
the
civil
definition
thing
of
to
fair
do?
comment. It might be a civil thing to do. If you don't like it, don't follow me on Twitter.
Milo Yiannopoulos represents the tip of the iceberg in a rising tide of hate and abuse in social media, one he clearly sees as a noble purpose.
Trolling is very important.
Why?
Trolling is absolutely essential. America needs more trolling because trolls are the only people who tell the truth these days.
Many join him on this crusade.
You at speed?
Yes, I am at speed.
Milo, just give me some voice level, would you, first of all, please?
My name is Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm senior editor for Breitbart News. I'm here at UC Irvine.
That's lovely. Thank you
Yeah,
very
we're
much.
recording.
You're happy.
Working with professionals.
Milo, can you just tell me, first of all, what in your view is behind the support for Donald Trump in this election? What is driving support for Mr. Trump, principally?
Well, it's a number of things. First of all, nobody's really talked about the one thing American voters care about the most, which is immigration. He was the first one to open that discussion up. He's the only person with a good position on it. Second of all is trade, globalism, globalization, sort of unaccountable bureaucratic elites that people have finally worked out actually don't run things very well, whether it's the Olympics, the EU, the UN, or anything else. And third, particularly that animates my supporters, is political correctness and free speech. We talk about free speech in very abstract, loose terms in Europe. Nobody really cares about it that much because we don't really have it. In America, they do care about it. The First Amendment is extremely important. Actually, it's the fundamental underpinning of American civilization. And it is under pretty grave threat in America, like I don't think it has been before. So those three things, I think, are what are getting people out to the polls for Trump.
Under threat in what way?
Well, there are all sorts of risks to free speech in America, whether they're coming from the progressive left, feminism, Black Lives Matter, on college campuses, safe space and trigger warning culture. There's a sense in the media in America also that the range of acceptable thoughts and opinions, that they're the ones that you can safely express without risking your newspaper column or risking your career. That's becoming narrower and narrower all the time, and also being shoved quite far to the left. So irrespective of your political positions, my view is that you should want your adversaries to be able to state their arguments in the strongest possible terms, and you should want, if you're confident that you're right, and that your facts are right, and that your way is the best way, you should believe in an open, free marketplace of ideas. Many people in America believe that that is not what you have here anymore.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between being offended and disagreeing with someone's facts or their interpretation of something. So, for example, you said today that Muslims hate everyone. All Muslims hate everyone was your position. Now, maybe you were joking, maybe you weren't. But
well, you know I was.
Well, sure, fine, fair enough.
You should ask me a question that's not a deliberate misrepresentation of what I said in my speech, because you're perfectly well aware from the context and the rhetoric of the speech that I was talking about different minority groups. So if you want to ask me a question about stuff like that, you should ask me a question that is less disingenuous.
Okay, you said Muslims like gang rape.
Well, I said they were going to bring their delicacies with them of pork chops, yogurt, and gang rape.
I think you said lamb,
if you're not,
to be fair.
Actually, it might be lamb chops. Of course, it would be lamb chops. If you're not prepared to read the comedy into that statement and you think that that is a literal expression, then I can't help you.
No, but that's my point. That's what I'm asking you about. Are you concerned that people are becoming confused between what is comedy and what is serious political comment, and that they can't listen to any of it because they just take offence?
No, I think you'd have to be so stupid to mistake my comedy routines and stand-up. I don't believe that anybody is so dumb that they can't tell the difference between a piece of political analysis and a joke. If you're one of those people, there's really no hope for you, and I don't care. What I do want, however, is to desensitize people to this offense-taking, grievance and victimhood culture. And if the way to do that, if the way to respond to outrage culture is to be outrageous, which it seems to be working, by the way, I'm winning on college campuses for sure, then so much the better. I simply don't take the charge seriously that people can't tell the difference between jokes and fact.
What is the alt-right?
The alt-right is a new movement. It's full of energy and enthusiasm and excitement, and it is primarily concerned with the three things that I think are energizing Trump voters: immigration, trade, and political correctness, and free speech generally. It takes a number of different forms. I mean, you can define it very, very broadly to include sort of classical liberals, disaffected leftists, ordinary conservatives, and this new, young, very energized, kind of trolly, mischievous, youthful contingent that has suddenly become interested in politics again. That's the wing that I'm sort of most closely associated with. And that's the most exciting bit, because it's the bit that had checked out politics almost for generations, really. Donald Trump's re-energized those people, and he's re-energized those people by standing up to the nannies, the cultural scolds, the bullies, the feminists, the people who don't want you to say things, don't want you to go there, the people who perpetually take, lines from speeches out of context in an attempt to sort of whatever, the people who, who are always talking about offense-taking, and nobody really cares. And that's the bit of the movement I really like, and that's the bit of movement that is sort of unstoppable, really. And irrespective of what happens in this elections, that's the bit of the movement that will win.
So let me ask you in your own words, because you accuse people of putting words into your mouth or taking things out of context or not recognizing humor when it's there. What is your view on Islam?
As a gay man, I'm very comfortable with Donald Trump's statements, although he made a few different statements with varying degrees of firmness on this subject. I'd be very comfortable with a halt on Muslim immigration. I would wish that had happened in London. It isn't radical Islam, it's Islam that is the problem. That is my view. I don't particularly like the way that European cities are changing. I think Germany is a horror show. I think London has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. And what happens in America matters for everybody else. What happens in America matters most, and I don't want America to go the same way.
Do you consider yourself a white nationalist?
No.
Isn't that what some people would think of when they hear of you don't like the changing face of places like London?
No, I'm talking about culture, not race.
Muslims coming in.
No, I'm talking about culture, not race, and it's typical of someone like the BBC to try to conflate the two, because
I'm
what they want to
asking you
do,
a question.
well, what they want to do is to suggest that if you're proud of your country and the ideals on which your country is founded, that somehow makes you a racist. It doesn't. I'm not talking about skin color. I don't care about skin color. All my boyfriends are black. I don't give a toss about skin color. What I do care about is values and ideas, and the regressive social attitudes of Muslims in the West are terrifying. Absolutely terrifying, and organizations like yours won't report on them honestly, accurately, or fairly. It's left to other places to do it. And then what you do is, once you fail to report on them accurately, is accuse people who are concerned with some justification about the changing nature of their culture, not race, in their countries, is you then accuse them of being white nationalists. That's pretty disgusting.
Let me be clear, I'm not accusing you of anything, I'm just asking.
If I was a white nationalist, it's one of those
it's a question, not an accusation.
Would you ask anyone that? Would you just go randomly ask anyone else? Hi madam, I've never met you before. Are you a white nationalist? No, you don't do that.
Well,
you're doing it because you want to suggest that there is something nefarious about my belief system. You're doing it because you want to associate my admiration for American ideals, my admiration for what happens in America, and saying that matters everywhere else, freedom, democracy, property, capital. You want to sort of associate that with race. I never did that. You did that. And then ask me whether I'm a white supremacist, asking if I think white people are better than others.
I said nationalist rather than supremacist, and you can no more read my mind than I can read yours. Let me ask you what you think about feminism.
You can read it enough to accuse me or to ask me whether I'm a white supremacist. It's absolutely absurd. I think it drives the sexes apart. I think, by the way, women agree with me. Fewer than 1 in 5 women in America describe themselves as feminists, and the number in England is just 7%, because feminists on the one hand say, oh, it's all just about equality, but what they do is quite different. And when women see the nasty, lesbianic, misandrist, hateful feminist movement, they run a mile from it. And everybody's running from it. The only people who are still feminists are journalists.
Are you in favour of gender equality?
Of course. Any sensible person is. But
What's
I'm not
the difference between that and feminism in your view?
Well, feminism preaches gender equality, but it practices misandry. It practices man-hating, and it spreads conspiracy theories and lies. If you tell a woman that everything that's wrong in her life, everything that's ever happened to her that's bad, all of the awful things are the fault of some man somewhere, or some mystical conspiracy theory force called the patriarchy, you're robbing that woman of the ability to better herself. You're robbing her of the ability to take control of her own life, to pass the exam she didn't pass, instead of saying, oh, the marking criteria is sexist. To take control and to be something. That feminism these days describes itself one way, but acts totally differently. And women agree with me. They've all seen it.
Isn't there a parallel between talking about the patriarchy in the way that you've just described it there, and some people talking about the establishment as a kind of all evil, all disastrous kind of concept?
Yeah, it's a fair point. Certainly, I think though that on the one hand, you know, patriarchy is a conspiracy theory dreamed up in social science departments and universities. The establishment is a very well understood nexus of government, big business, and and various other organs of civil and national society. I don't think anybody really denies that there is a revolving door between, let's say, government and big business. That, you know, different bits of this this thing kind of support each other. The way academia supports the media, supports the entertainment industry. When people talk about the establishment as a sort of scary, looming presence, I think they're right. When they talk about the patriarchy, I think it's a conspiracy theory.
I know you have to go. I'd like to ask you one more question, if I may.
You're going to call me a sexist, or racist?
What
are you going to ask me now?
Simply asking you questions. And this last question is, what do you think will happen in the United States if Donald Trump loses this election to the this movement that has been energized by his candidacy?
We're constantly told by the media that this will die with Trump. Couldn't be less true. One of the ways you know that is it started a long time before Trump showed up. Trump capitalized on it. He didn't invent it. And this large slice of the American population, which could be anywhere between 20 and 50%, who don't like globalism, who don't like political correctness, who do want stronger borders, who aren't happy with the trade arrangements, who are fans of various bits of the Trump agenda, those people are not going anywhere. In fact, with Hillary Clinton in the White House, they're going to be hugely energized. They're going to be angry. They're going to be louder than ever, and they're going to start winning converts from her side who get disillusioned with her. I would say probably 30% of the audience, everywhere I go, is what I would call disaffected liberals. People who don't like their own side, who wonder how their own side went so crazy, and who will come up to me, you know, afterwards and say, you know what, I don't really agree with you on anything, but it's very important for me to be here. Those are the people that are going to start voting Republican next time around, and it is going to probably, you know, I mean, who knows, right? But there is no way that just because Trump wins or doesn't win, either way, that this movement, this huge nationalist, populist uprising against the nannies, against the globalists, against all of the, you know, massed ranks of the global elites, there's no way it's going anywhere, irrespective of what happens in the election.